July, which would be, let's see, what would that be? Or is that this the 16th, I think? I think July 16th, right?
Yes, July 16th.
I'm gonna be on a boat.
You're gonna be on a boat?
Yep.
Fun. Oh, that sounds great.
This isn't working again.
Brandon.
Oh, now it's going. Okay. Are you ready or not? Okay. All right. Good morning. Thanks for being here. This is our talk on caring for aging parents. It's really a talk about long-term care planning. So I've just kind of adapted it for different audiences. We're all aging. Parent yourself, you might be solo, but we're still working on what things you have to think about for long-term care planning and what some afflictions you might want to think about as you get older as well, because we'll talk a little bit about loss and confusion as well. But I always like to start off, before I get started, my name is Matt Santelli. I'm the Education and Outreach Specialist at the Pierce County Aging and Disability Resource Center. Your handout, when we get to the end, will have a page on it. Plus, there's some resources on the table there. Some highlighted things specific to long-term care planning. We're always thinking about the care we might need. So I have some handouts there, all focused on caregiving. There's a caregiving coach program that Multi-Care Older Adult Services offers. This is free. The contact information. If you are a caregiver for a family member or know who it is, please get this flyer for them. We have plenty today. Pick up extra. Also coming up this Friday, June 21, our caregiver conference. We're sponsoring. It's an event from 8 to 3:30. There's going to be resources. There's going to be speakers, a lot of interesting presentations. We're out of the lunches, apparently. It's free lunch on there. But if you attend, just bring your own lunch along or bring some snacks to eat. You don't have to stay the whole day. If you are looking for continuing ed credits, we're offering 5 continuing education credits if you attend the whole day. So that's, some people need those if they're caregiving and stuff like that. So that's Friday. If you walk away from here and think, I've got to do some planning for my long-term care, this is a free legal service through the Dementia Legal Planning Project. You don't have to have dementia. You just have to be 60 or older. And if you call them, they will set you up a legal advisor, help you set up powers of attorney and advance directives. So this is really useful. It's not for last will and testament. It's for stuff you're doing while you're alive. About that a little bit more during the presentation. If you're a caregiver or know someone is and they need support, there's a caregiver support group that meets in Puyallup down at Good Samaritan Older Adult Services, 1 to 2:30. Again, this is another one. Even if it's not for you, you might want to take it for a friend and family member. We also have information about our veteran services. We have a Pierce County Veterans Bureau where we have service officers in there. If you're a veteran or a spouse of a veteran, you know someone who's a veteran, they could just walk to someone about benefits, including the PACT legislation that was passed a few years ago. That's legislation where they're reopening a lot of disability claims for anyone who's during basic training. If there's an illness or injury that's still impacting them after they left the service, they can get a disability pension for that. My colleague Lindsay, even though he had got denied decades ago and got a pretty significant monthly pension, it's really helping out with his bills. So again, maybe not for you, a friend or family member or a neighbor that's a veteran, please pick. And then I also have some information on some other really important programs. There's a Medicare savings program we help people apply for based on income. They can get their Part B deduction paid. There's no resource limit on this. It's just based on income. And on the back, these are all your free Medicare Part B preventive benefits. A lot of new stuff on there, such as the shingles vaccine covered at 100%, pneumonia vaccine covered at 100%. So think about your preventive vaccines. That's one way you're going to avoid getting long-term care needs. What we're finding in older adults, especially, anything that produces an immune system response, things like pneumonia, things like shingles, can really be damaging not only to your physical health, but it affects your brain health as well. So this is the time. Shingles vaccines work. Pneumonia vaccines work. They're known as free vaccines. So get those. The information's on the back here. And then finally, we have a couple of programs we're talking about and sponsoring. Senior Farmers Program, $80 debit card you can get to use at the farmers markets. The income eligibility is on there. You have to be 60 or older, 55 or older, Native American, Alaska Native. And it's done all online or over the phone. We'll send you the debit card and you can use that to use until you've used up the $80 at the farmers markets. It might not be for you, might be a friend or family member that needs that. And then finally,
Federal way, one of them?
I think you can use the Pierce County ones in Pierce County. If you're a Federal Way resident, they've got a King County program. Yeah. But yeah, you could use it at any one in the King County. So like in Pierce County, I think there's 7 or 8 go on that we. And then finally, the Walk Cares program. This is the payroll deduction for those of you who are actively working that started last July. So into it. This is designed to fund your long-term care needs after you paid into it for 3 out of 6 years. So people will be eligible as soon as 2026, I guess it will be. Although some people will be eligible next year based upon early retirement situations. But this provides you a bank of $36,500 to use for your long-term care needs. So I bring this up because it is part of long-term care planning for those folks who are still working. Retired, it's not relevant, but it's good to know that this program's out there, especially because in the fall there'll be an initiative on the ballot where it moves it to try to move it from being a mandatory payroll deduction to an optional payroll deduction. So you might want to just pick this up to be advised about what Walk Cares is and how it works. Oh, they're on the table. There's other information there as well. Now we'll jump into the program a little bit. I always want to make sure I give a disclaimer. Is it not working again? I don't know what's going on. Oh, there. Information provided during this presentation not to be an exhaustive list of all aging situations. Family caregivers especially need support, should call our office, get some advice, get some guidance, or call some their Medicare or provider care service program, and talk with family members and trusted individuals on planning. So we've got just the 2 of you today. So feel free to raise a hand. I'll stop and ask if you have any questions or comments. We won't go the full 2 hours because it's just the 2 of you, but feel free to jump in and ask a question or make a comment. So these are the top cover. We're talking a lot about caregiving because I think when we think of long-term care planning, we think if I'm ill or injured into my older life, who's going to be the folks that are managing my care and how do I arrange for that ahead of time? So we're going to talk a lot about caregiving, duties of caregiving, what's that like being a caregiver for someone, whether it's an aging parent or relative, the challenges facing caregivers. They're a bit about dementia because I think most worry about memory loss and confusion as we get older. My parents were very physically healthy into their 90s. And just in the last year of life, my mom really had a dementia period where she was very ill from dementia. Same with my dad. But up until then, into their 90s, they were very healthy. So they were very functional at home. They had their pains and illnesses and injuries, did fine. So you really want to think of what a dementia warning sign looks like versus typical aging. So we'll talk about that a little bit. And then we'll talk about actions you and family members can take for proper care plan, some professional care options that are out there, how to make your home safer and more accessible as you get older. This is a real key because people kind of neglect this idea of what an aging household might look like. It's different than how when you're physically robust in your 40s, 50s, you can go up and down stairs, you can go into a basement, you can go up into an attic. That you have to think about that differently when you're aging, and safety first, because all you in an emergency room, and that'll potentially make your life incredibly different as you get older. My mom had a series of 4 or 5 falls in that last year of her life, put her in the hospital and then in a care facility, and she never returned home. All right. So we're talking about care first. So unpaid family and friend caregivers. So we use the term caregiver for anyone that's kind of around you as you get older, or you might be a caregiver as you get older for someone in the family. The definition of caregiving has changed over time. Family dynamics, the economy, longevity changes have changed a lot of those things. I'm guessing most of us in the room know someone in their 90s, we even know someone in there who's 100. One of our client visits, one of my colleagues visited someone yesterday who's turning 100 today, still living at home. So we all know situations like that, people who are very robust late into their 90s, even into their 100s. So the idea that you might have a very short period of time when you need care, that may be true, but you might have a longer period of time as well. And that's what the planning session is all about. Technological changes have also imposed an additional caregivers and us as we get older. Giving care as a caregiver can be defined in many aspects, which we're going to talk about. Lifespans are increasing. In fact, the fastest growing group of people in the United States are those who are 80 years or older. And we've all seen the numbers with big social programs like Social Security. There's fewer young workers supporting more people old age taking Social Security. And that's a concern, not only here, it's a concern in the whole Western world, at least. And I think in a lot of Asian countries too, they're finding they're kind of plateau, what's known as the replacement rate for aging. All the more reason you need to have the plan in thinking of long-term care. So we always like to give a huge list of caregiver duties because even with my dad, it felt like when I was taking care of him and my mom, I was just being a quality son, you know, just doing what sons should do. But I was also doing a lot of caregiving. And when that role changes, sometimes you need some outside guidance to make that work better for you. So things like managing finances for someone in the family, that would be caregiving. Understanding online platforms for access to care receiver bank accounts and things, that's caregiving. And just think about how different that is. I mean, back in the day, we all wrote checks or we would actually pay cash for a utility bill, for example. Now, many of those utility bills are handled in some sort of an online account. It's paid automatically. You don't even think about it. That was useful for me with my parents because I set everything up on automatic payments. So I didn't have to write so many checks every month. On the other hand, when you do stuff like that, you got to know what the passwords are, right? Because passwords are a big part of our lives now that didn't used to be. So this is why things can change over time with the changes in technology. It's very different than it used to be. And the idea that you would routinely pay for things with a credit card, that's something of a new development, right? Because we grew up in a world where it was rare you might use a credit card. Again, people pay check. Nowadays, credit cards, debit cards, in some places, that's all you can use. A lot of restaurants in Tacoma are completely cashless. You have to use credit cards. Cheney Stadium, remember going there as a kid to watch ball games. And the kids, we'd run around with cash and buy a popsicle. No cash allowed in Cheney Stadium anymore. It's all credit or debit cards. So there's a change happening, and that's a change we're kind of try to stay ahead of because it makes it easier in some ways to do older adult planning, but it also makes it more challenging in a lot of ways too. Housekeeping services, transportation, managing the motor vehicles. I did a lot of that for my parents as they got older. Supportive medical equipment at home, things like grab bars, shower heads, monitored alarm systems, life alert systems, all that stuff. The technology does make it easier. If you use technology correctly, it makes it a lot easier. And we'll talk about that later. And then anything you're doing directly to help that person take better care of themselves. Personal hygiene. I know with my mom, it was a big fight to get her to shower. My dad would shower if I reminded him enough and I stood by and helped him. Foot care was a big deal. My dad had some terrible foot problems. We had to manage that really carefully. Medication management. My mom, if I asked her on any given day, she would say I took my medications, but she didn't. So we had to put them in her hand and make sure she took them. All those being caregivers, as do things like what we're going to talk about today: benefits, Social Security, Medicaid, the legal forms. We'll talk more about this: durable power of attorney forms, protective payee forms, advanced directive post forms, last will and testament. And then anything you're spending time with that parent in a different way where it's more supportive. It could be taking a car ride with them, watching a TV program, watching the sports program, going to church with them, whatever the case may be. Pretty much everything on this list is stuff that I did with my own parents as they got older. So I just use that as an example. But now, you know, going into following into my retirement years, my wife's already retired. These are things we're thinking about for our household. So thank God we've got money. So one right now is we're landscaping our yard and installing a sprinkler system because I'm thinking now how many times my dad fell in the backyard on hoses because he'd be trying to water his yard and moving hoses around. And I'm thinking, okay, I can be stubborn and say, well, I'm just going to water it, not pay for the sprinkler system, but I'm paying for the sprinkler system because I recognize as I get older, that's not going to be safe for me to be crawling through rose bushes and things trying to water stuff. Okay, so any questions so far? Any of that? I hope it all makes sense. So for me, how did I recognize something had changed with my parents? So basically, it's when I realized the activities I did with them were no longer things I wanted to do with them and things I needed to do for them. So this is where all of us, as we age, we have to think, okay, what's easy for me now to do? This is an example. My mom typically would drive my dad to the doctor, and then she would drive herself to the doctor. They saw the same doctor at the same time. So it was super easy for them when my mom was capably driving, but it became a lot more difficult when she lost her driving privileges, because then it was my task to get them to the doctor.
Did that happen?
Good question. So my mom, probably, she lived to just short of 93. So I think it was probably her 91st year when there was something more going on. And that was basically her telling us things that she couldn't do anymore. Like, she kept calling me every week telling me the stove broken, and she just could no longer do the digital stove anymore, even though she had done it for a full year. And then she would say things had gone missing. Like, she had a little Red Riding Hood cookie jar. She would say it's missing. Well, she was moving it, not remembering. And then I would see the mail piling up. She was always very good at clearing the mail, categorizing, filing it, and all of a sudden she wasn't doing it anymore. The driving, that was in that same year, when I realized she just wasn't safe, and I drove with her, and it was just very dangerous. Plus, she was having some visual disturbances with her dementia, misjudging things and perceptual problems. My dad lost his license probably a year before that, around 90. Now, he was never a particularly good driver, but he got a lot worse, and he was pulled over by State Patrol a couple of times. So they sent a notice into the driver licensing office and said, this man needs to be retested. And despite our best cars and different times, he failed the driving test miserably, so he wasn't driving anymore. So right around 90 for them. It could be a different time for other people. I mean, I probably all know people in their 90s that are still carefully, you know. You are wonderful. How old are you now? Way to go! Congratulations. I would have had no idea from talking with you. You seem very young and active and sharp. So good job. That's wonderful. So this is kind of an example of what I'm talking about. Going to the doctor then meant bringing a notebook, making sure they were dressed, they had something to eat, going and asking a lot of questions, and having the doctor kind of ask me questions back about how they were doing. Then taking them to the pharmacy, taking them home, make sure they had dinner when they got home, all that. So it became quite a so. And this was just because neither of them were safe to drive anymore, and I took over that task. By the numbers, about 43.5 million people act as family caregivers now, unpaid. When caring for an adult age 50 or older, about 34.2 million Americans take on that role. Things like dementia, like my mom had Alzheimer's, my dad had a couple of strokes late in life, makes it even more difficult, because in our experience in the county, an aging person that's physically limited can stay at home independently pretty much till the very end, as long as they're able to conduct their care. But if it's someone that develops memory loss, confusion, doesn't matter if they're 60 years old and something happens, very hard to keep them safe at home. Typically, spouse or family member takes that role of being there, but that probably means someone needs to be like there 24 hours every day, making sure that person doesn't get in trouble. Versus if you had you lose an ability to walk, still live at home capably. You might lose an arm or something for a broken shoulder. You can still live at home capably. You might even be in the process of cancer treatments. You can still live at home capably. Very difficult to do that alone if you have some memory loss and confusion going on. Absolutely. Okay. Cool. Yeah. Okay, yeah, I'd like to hear more. We're going to talk about the whole family discussion part. So yeah, I'd love to have you share that. That'd be really useful. Oh, well, great. Excellent. Good deal. So this is kind of an interesting statistic I found, that caregivers vary in age, obviously more than the people they're giving care to. 48% of caregivers are 18 to 49 years old. Only 14% of patients receiving the care of that age, which makes sense. It's typically an older adult, where someone who's an adult child or spouse is caring for them. But this is interesting, where it says the average age of a caregiver sits at about 49 years old. And that's right around the time, looking back, when I started to really move more aggressively into having managed things for my parents. I'm 59 years old now, so it was about 10 years ago. So that was right on the money, that number. And this can reflect that people are living longer, adult children are doing more as caregivers for parents. And we'll talk a little bit about the professional agency caregiver shortage that's going on statewide and nationwide, unfortunately. So challenges, like we said, that rapidly growing 80 and older group. That means fewer young people are available to support that group. Um, Most of us know and have seen this among our own families that typically people are marrying older. People are waiting through their 20s to kind of figure their lives out a little bit, marrying much older than they used to. I even saw it's a statistic about driving for young people, which really surprised me. But then I thought, okay, there's reasons for that. When I was growing up, and you guys probably experienced this too, getting to age 16 was like a big, big deal. We all knew someone in the high school who was the first to turn 16, and if you were smart, you glommed onto that person because you knew they'd be big, right? They become your best friend. I read a statistic that said nationwide, at the age where people are eligible to drive, states it's 15, some 6, some 18, it's down like 30% from even like 20 years ago, where they're choosing not to get their driver's.
No desire to have a driver's
Isn't that interesting? Yeah.
permit and he didn't even want.
Yeah, yeah.
He doesn't wanna drive.
Yeah.
He's got a Jeep that's available to him to drive and he doesn't want to.
So there you go.
It's gonna help that out if you travel by light transit rather than car.
I think there's more options in some places. I think a lot of it has to do with the convenience of maybe Ubering. A lot of kids bike now, they're very environmentally conscious. Plus, they can do more. They can meet up online. We didn't have that luxury when I was a kid. The meetup online was not available. So if you wanted to meet up outside of school, you had to physically go somewhere to McDonald's or the bowling alley or the movie theater. They've got a very different option there where they're doing a lot of communication without leaving their home. So I think that has a lot to do with it as well. So yeah, this is all about the struggles for family caregivers, and professional care providers are really struggling to fill positions. The state has initiatives to kind of encourage folks to do caregiving training at community colleges and things, and are really trying to incentivize people where they'll pay for the tuition. They go through caregiver training and work as caregivers for a year or two. But statewide and nationwide, it's a real struggle because the unemployment rate is pretty low. So all service industries are really struggling to fill positions: hotels, bowling alleys, golf courses, restaurants, you name it. And so the caregiving world isn't any different. And caregiving jobs can be very, very difficult. You deal with people in a lot of really tough physical and mental situations. So we're doing the best we can to encourage caregiver agencies to come online at the county. There's fewer available for us, for folks who need it, state-funded care versus private. You're always going to be able to find caregiving if you're private paying, but you're probably going to pay $40 an hour for it too. It's not cheap. So just keep that in mind.
That kind of precipitate into unions.
Well,
Here, and then instead of $40 an hour, 68.
yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of labor trends that kind of are really transforming the market right now. Yeah, lot going on to really transform the market. We're even now asked to pilot a program where we're going to do like remote caregiving coaching. So like right now we have a family support program. The information is back there where we provide relief care to like a husband and wife caregiver. So if the husband needs a break, we'll have a caregiver in like 6 hours a week, just give him a break, knowing someone's there at home with his wife so he can go play golf or go to the grocery store. But now we're being tasked to be told we're going to kind of a telehealth kind of coaching thing on a different level. So we're working on that a little bit now. And I think all of us now are in that world post-COVID, talking to your doctor over the phone or on a screen. And it's funny because back in the day prior to COVID, good luck doing that. They always would say you need to set an appointment. Now, when I had to talk to my doctor about a referral I needed, I had two choices. I could do an email contact with her or a phone contact. So I chose the phone contact. It's not an option given to me to say, come into the office. It was just like, we're not going to waste the office time on this simple referral. So they called me and we set it up that way. So, okay. Caregiver mortality. This is why we really start with talking about caregivers in families. Depending upon the study you read, 30 to 70% of husband, wife, and partner caregivers age 60 and older die before the person they're providing care to. So plan ahead is really important here. These are really those tragic situations where the husband or wife just wears down over time trying to lift someone, feed them, bathe them, keeping them safely in the house, keeping them from wandering, especially in memory loss and confusion situations where a person might have what's known as a sundowner syndrome, where they sleep during the day, they're up all night. It really exhausted my dad. It really tired him out and physically affected him as well. So this statistic does not surprise me. So if you know anyone in a caregiver situation that's really struggling, take advantage of things like this caregiver coaching program. Call us about the family caregiver support program. Encourage them to go to caregiver support groups like this one to kind of normalize things for them. Again, this might not impact you specifically, but grab the information for a friend or a family member or someone in your faith community. Okay, so we're going to jump in talking a little bit about memory loss and confusion and dementia. But first, any comments or questions so far? Okay, so the good news is on memory loss, confusion, and dementia diagnoses, it's not following the same path that we feared it would. Nationwide, the actual number of folks newly diagnosed with dementia is kind of plateaued. So it's still a significant number, but it's not like it was. It's plateaued for some reason. Some of that might have been because a lot of older adults tragically passed away during COVID. There could be other reasons for that. We are seeing this anomaly though, where younger and younger people are diagnosed with dementia. People in their 40s and 50s in some cases, which is really tragic. When we talk about dementia and treatment for it, we always just talk about managing the situation. Every couple of years, you'll read about a new medication that's been approved for it. There's another one coming online that Medicare is going to approve. One was actually an infusion had to do rather than an oral medication. In the 21 years I've done the job, we haven't seen any of those become the miracle drugs we hoped they would be. At best, they kind of manage the decline a little bit, but they don't turn around someone who's already suffering memory loss and confusion, unfortunately. And there's a belief under the scientific world that a buildup of what are known as tau proteins in the brain, these plaques develop into these amyloid tangles in the brain, because there's some correlation between people with dementia and brain autopsies that they do with the plaques. On the other hand, sometimes you'll see someone with a fully plaque-filled brain who doesn't have dementia. So that's still an open question. You know, it may, just so you know, it may turn out that belief wasn't necessarily a cause and effect thing going on. That might have been a byproduct of some other process. So it still might be meaningful, but it might not be the cause and effect that we thought it was. So here's 10, kind of adapted it for my mom. And I give this because I like to normalize for people what's typical as we age. Forgetting recently learned information, common sign of dementia. So again, this isn't forgetting a phone number that you had and having to look it up. This with my mom, the example I gave was the digital oven. She had old dial oven. We went and looked at new ovens for her, and she loved the idea of getting the digital oven. Oh, this is great. I can easily specifically put the oven temperature in the digital panel. She loved it for a year. And then all of a sudden she couldn't figure it out. It was broken every week. She would call me. I would go over there, show her how to do it. Oh, days later, it's broken. I would go over. I actually put a list of instructions on the cabinet above the stove. 2 days later, it's broken. So she couldn't remember what she had already learned because it's short-term memory that goes first when it comes to dementia. In planning or solving problems, again, I talked about the mail stacking. My mom was all good mail processor and check writer. And then all of a sudden there were late notices. I would look at her checkbook. She hadn't written a check out in months. And so again, this was a skill she had that she lost. Difficult completing familiar tasks at home, work, leisure. My mom was always one to change clothes every day, look good, right for the seasons. All of a sudden she was wearing shorts in the middle of winter. All of a sudden she was wearing a heavy sweater in the middle of summer. None of it made any sense anymore. Her brain just wasn't processing like it used to. Confusing time or place, losing track of dates, seasons, passage of time, forgetting where she was or how they got there. we'd go to church, same church they had gone to for decades, and she would leave church and say, "Wow, that was a really nice church. We should go there again." I'm like, "Mom, it's the same church you've been going to forever." "No, no, it looked very different to me." And so we would kind of make a joke about it and tell her, "Hey, we're going to that new church again, this week." But yeah, so that was apparent there. Trouble understanding visual images and spatial relationships. So an example of this is I even wrote like on the TV for her on with an arrow on the button on the TV because she couldn't figure out the remote anymore. Even with that on there, I would go there late at night, visit them. The TV was on, no one was watching because she couldn't figure out how to turn the TV on and off. And even if I showed her the note, I said, "Mom, what does that say?" "It says on off." I said, "What's below it?" "Oh, there's a," but it still didn't make the connection that that was meaningful information on turning the TV on her. Difficulty with words, speaking, or writing. With my mom, it was just no longer able to out a check, no longer able to really come with the doctor about what on with her. She'd get very quiet during dinner table conversations and just kind of look away. Um, this was someone who was typically not like that, very active and talkative at the dinner table. Misplacing items and blaming others. I talked about that little Red Rider, a little Red Riding Hood cookie jar that she had would disappear. We would be very upset. He would call us. We would find it in the closet. Once we found it in the basement. Once we found it in the backyard. I remember once I came out and it was sitting very neatly on the front lawn. What's it doing here? Had a life of its own, and that was just because she was moving it for whatever reason and then forgetting she had moved it. And then she'd get very defensive if we say, "Mom, you moved it again." "No, no, someone else came in and moved that cookie jar. Decreased her poor judgment. My mom didn't do this, giving away money valuables, but she still like sometimes very impulsively middle of the night, and we had a vocal alarm on the front door, and my dad would hear the door opening, and she would say that she needed to go home or things like that. And she would, "Oh, she is home. No, I need to go home." She would have very little filter when she would talk to people sometimes, and be very rude when she was not like that. Sometimes she would even be profane at times, which is really surprising. And with withdrawal from work or social activity, I remember how upset she was. I basically had to empty her purse of anything of value because if we would go to church, she would play around with stuff in her purse and leave stuff on the church pew. She would do that at restaurants. She'd start taking stuff out and kind of get obsessed with it. So I told her, I said, "Well, we're going to keep all your stuff at home, but you can still carry the purse with." She was very upset by that. She said, "What's the point of a woman carrying a purse with nothing in it?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, you're right, Mom, but it's for your safety. And so this was kind of a change. She was always very careful. She was the careful one among my mom and dad. My dad was a little more forgetful of lifetime than she was, but all of a sudden it was like, okay, you're kind of preventing me from having the role I've had my whole life. And I was just like, "Fortunately, Mom, can't have you losing a checkbook or your ID and stuff like that. That's why your purse is empty." And changes in mood and personality. Like I said, she would get kind of sarcastic, sometimes extending. She would get very stressed out in situations for no apparent reason. For you who are going through that, this isn't a class about managing dementia. You always look at first, what's the emotion being exhibited versus what is the content of what the person is saying. So with my mom, I knew that she was having a fearful time when she would say, there's soldiers out on the lawn, they're pointing guns at me." Okay, she's scared. "Mom, you're scared." So we would close the blinds and just, her talk with her for a little while. At other times, she would just start laughing, no reason at all. So, "Mom, how are you feeling?" "Oh, I'm feeling happy." So you kind of celebrate those happy moments too. You don't worry so much about the content. It would be silly for us to say, "Mom, there's no soldiers on. Mom, there's nothing going on. Why are you laughing?" You just mind with the emotion. Don't worry about the content or the context. That's the important thing.
It's best not to talk about it at all.
Different.
Right?
Yeah, maybe you can comment on that conversation you had with your mom, Jenna, about that.
And it actually took me a while. It's very hard to have conversations with saying nonsensical things. You want to correct them
Yeah.
or bring reality to the situation. I really found that once I was able to go with that in mind, just go along with whatever she's saying, it really created so much more harmony between us by not trying. And I really, what Matt is saying about identifying the emotion, that's huge.
Because yeah, you're not going to talk them out of what she was very vividly seeing. You're not going to tell her it's not happening. That's just going to cause acrimony and
That's
anger.
how present.
I live in an area where we had a very famous jockey, one of those mile runners on the old racetrack. Anyway, he would come over to my place and visit. And he said, "Oh, you don't come to my place."
Yeah.
Well, I was there last week.
Oh, okay.
Then he would say, I really like you. You're my best friend.
Yeah, yeah. Like I said, you get these kind of misfires of the brain that happen. Yeah.
He's comfortable with you. You can really be his best
That's-
friend, but it's his way of, and he's comfortable talking to her. He enjoys your conversation.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I lived with that. I gave up,
Sure.
Really is that? That's really nice.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, that's it. That's yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Instead of, "Oh, it's just me,
Yep.
kids."
yeah,
Great,
yeah,
that's great.
yeah. We should do that. We should get together. Exactly.
It's just the whole dynamic.
Yeah, yeah. This is a funny story talking about the visual disturbances she had. Um, um, she would insist sometimes when she was angry that people were staring at her through the window or hiding in the closet. And she would accuse us of pretending not to see them just to make her feel crazy or look crazy. So she was due for her regular vision exam. So she felt irritated. I took her in for a vision exam. The doctor said her eyesight was great. She didn't need to wear glasses or anything. But in her mind, that everything she was seeing was real. The doctor said her eyesight's just fine. So she get angry again, say, "I know there's clowns and soldiers on the front lawn because the doctor said there's nothing wrong with my eyesight, you know." So that was her justification to validate these terrible visual disturbances she was having. And normally she was kind of entertained by them. She said she would see parades going down the street. She saw a rhinoceros on the lawn. Like, where's that coming from? But when there was something upsetting her, then they were threatening. Then there's a rhinoceros house. There's clowns making faces and pounding on the window. The soldiers are pointing guns at me. Other times when she was doing fine, it wasn't upsetting to her. And there were physical ailments like urinary tract infections that we could kind of pick up on depending on how those visual disturbances change to a more threatening manner than a more mild manner too. So okay, so what actions should family and all of us as part of our own family, what do we need to think about care planning? So discussions. Our goal at the county is always to think, how do we keep someone aging in place? Okay. We don't want to disrupt the household situation if we don't have to. And we can do that by keeping people healthy, safe, and financial stable in their home. We have caregiver programs for that, rotation programs, home meals, home repair and weatherization programs, modification programs, all these things. Not everybody's eligible for them depending upon their income situations. The same services are available. So like with my parents, my mom had an emergency appendectomy in 2012. She fully recovered, but she was using a walker for quite a few years, a few months, I should say. My dad was already using a cane. So when she was in the hospital, we installed a ramp, we installed grab bars, detachable shower head. Believe me, that detachable shower head, I sound like a broken record on this because I bring it up at every talk. Having that detachable shower head is huge for hygiene. Have one now at our own house. We did a full ADA remodel on our bathroom, our own house. Having the ability as you get older, or whether you're injured or ill, the water around your body versus when you're younger, you can move around in the shower, get your head wet. But if you have a broken hip, my wife broke her shoulder one year, was a full year of recovery. Having that ability to just take that shower head off, shower yourself off, putting a shower chair in the shower so you can sit down comfortably, wash yourself capably. That kind of stuff is really meaningful because not having that, you're gonna fail on your hygiene, and then physically you'll try to keep doing what you did when you were much younger. I'm 59. I talked to a woman, what was that, at the cancer care conference a couple weeks ago. Her mother at 99 still mows her lawn at 99. And I was like, wow, that's pretty impressive because I'm 59. I cannot imagine still mowing my lawn 40 years from now, considering my knees are already killing me by the time I'm done mowing the lawn. But people can stay very active for a long period of time, which is wonderful. So maybe we'll have you chime in, sir, because this is kind of what we were talking about, having these family meetings about long-term care planning, talking with your family members, assigning roles for what might need to do, talking to other care supporters who are willing to provide some help. So what was your experience with that?
Well, we got the family together, it's like, we've been communicating, my daughter lives in the Yakima, the other lives in Browns Point.
Okay.
So we just got them all together, we sat down and said, what do we have to do with the rest of your life?
Great.
And my house is big enough, I'm gonna have my daughter come over and we decide. She's gonna take this bedroom, and she'll have access to the rest of the house.
Beautiful.
You have 2 rooms, because they give you a bedroom and a computer room.
Excellent.
The next to that is a huge room that she's gonna sit in her office.
Beautiful.
So we've got something going on.
Wonderful. That's great. See, this is exactly what we hope folks who come to this talk will do, you know. So did you generate that discussion? Was this something that's been in the works for a while, or? Okay, great. Excellent. Excellent. It's really good news because when I start talking about this, we really kind of encourage folks to start that discussion for yourself or for that adult, if you're an adult child, for those parents. And I always give the story where on more than one occasion when I was doing direct service with client families, the clients themselves, the older adults would say, yeah, we want to do that, but my son, he doesn't want to do it. And I would talk to the son, who's like, what's on with that? Can we help? And he's like, well, I want to do it, but my parents don't want to do it. It's like, well, somebody's got to do it. So I applaud you guys for coming together as a team and making that happen. That's great news.
Situation too where my son is from a previous marriage.
Okay.
The stepson.
Okay.
But as I said to a lot of people, if I had to choose the son, I would have chosen.
Yeah. Yeah. There you go. Yeah.
I have a dog over the Yakima, and my son called me one day and said, Dad, I don't know, I don't want to take care of the will. I don't want to become the executive.
Yeah.
Melanie, the executive tricks, because he says, I have my own estate. Never thought about that.
Okay. Yeah.
So he's eliminating, I'm saying, she has already eliminated out of his will. So it's gonna work.
Yeah, absolutely.
This lawyer, and we divided the money that she gets the house. And so she's gonna move in. She already owns it.
Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah.
We
Yeah.
have to be careful.
Yeah.
I checked with the lawyer. I said, can I deed it over? He said, no, don't do that.
Yeah.
Because if you do that, now she's responsible for the taxes.
Yeah.
And all. So you just keep doing what you're doing. And when the time comes and you pass away, she's.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm gonna talk a little bit about that. One of our other classes will deal with legal documents.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. But that's very good because what we always say here, you know, allow everyone to talk about their fears. You kind of said, what are we going to do to make this work? Because being the care receiver, like you, it can be difficult as well because you're having to make these decisions of who's the folks around you that you know are capable of handling the different tasks. And it's wonderful that the son said, I don't think this is a task for me. That's great. That honesty is really should be applauded, you know. Yeah.
What do I want with your estate?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Very smart, I thought.
Yeah. And just like you were saying, you've got some dates, timelines, and plans in place, certain tasks are going to be completed. Again, things like home modifications, setting up transportation alternatives, financial management, this is stuff you do before it's necessary. Okay. I mean, we kind of had to sneak those home modifications in on a day when my sister took my dad for lunch because he didn't want to do it, even though I told him from the nursing home that my mom was going to come home on her for several months. It's like, I'm not going to have her go up on those front stairs, concrete front porch stairs. So we kind of had to sneak it in. He wasn't happy, but you know, he lived with it because he wasn't going to remove them. But again, before the need is there, we should have done that years before the need was there, those home modifications. And the same with the transportation. We had already been talking more and more about don't have mom drive to church. I'll go to church with her. Don't have mom drive to the doctor's appointment. I'll take her to the doctor's appointment. So you kind of have to think about how you're going to manage those things before the need arises. And the same with the financial. You don't want to have someone get into complete financial distress before you start helping them manage things financially. Siblings assigned to financial insurance medical tasks need to get very familiar with all the details there. Medical lives, I didn't even know a lot about my parents' medical lives until I really started taking them to the doctor. And then I found out my mom had been treated for a tumor on her ankle. I had no idea that it even happened. She never told us about it. So it really helps to have somebody kind of be your care partner as you get older and planning those things. And then the documents, this is another thing. You want to make sure you get these in place before necessary. And we're going to have a whole class on this in July, but just to make sure for those of you who might not make it to that next one, these are really the basic documents you want to think about. So the first one is the POST form. That's also known as a DNR, do not resuscitate form, physician's order for life-sustaining treatment. That's one that has to be completed with the doctor. So one thing we always advise people and strongly is make sure you have a relationship with the doctor where you and regularly might mean once a year if healthy. But you have to have that doctor knowledgeable about what's going on with you, and getting the POST form is very important because hospitals are going to ask you, do you have the POST form? And maybe you want to talk a little bit what the POST looks like?
Yeah, it's actually a bright green form, kind of a hard stock form. It's got a couple of different parts to it. It stands for physician's orders for life-sustaining treatment. And it's there's two parts to it. The first part is basically resuscitate or not. So if somebody's heart stops, do you want CPR? Do you want efforts done to resuscitate? Yes or no? That's simple. Part B has to deal more with treatment. So if you were to become an emergent medical condition, would you want full interventions, like for us to put a tube down your throat to breathe for you, pace your heart, things like that? Do you want limited interventions, which might be like IV antibiotics, pneumonia, something that might treat an illness that you could recover from? Or do you simply want to accept end of life and have comfort measures only to keep you comfortable? So it's a conversation to have with your doctor, and fill out that form, sign it. We generally recommend that you put it either on a refrigerator or the back of a bedroom door. We as first responders look for it. So if we're called to the house and your heart isn't beating, we ask, is there a POST form in place? And then we honor your wishes by following the directions you've given on that form.
Wonderful. Thank you. Excellent description there.
Comes under the heading of no heroics, doesn't it?
I'm sorry?
That comes under the heading of no heroics.
It doesn't say no heroics. It just says, attempt resuscitation, yes or no.
So we have the red packet files of life there. Again, you can take one for yourself or a friend. That's where you put all your basic medical information, contact information, what your faith tradition is. Put that white pages and hang it back on your fridge. It has a magnetic strip. So oftentimes we do encourage people to have the POST form in that same area or hanging right next to it. So both the basic medical information is there for the first responders and the POST form is there as well. So again, take one for yourself, a friend, neighbor, someone that might live alone and who should have that in their home. So then the second one, this is one you can set up without the doctor's intervention. And you did mention an attorney cert. So yeah, we always encourage people to think about an elder law attorney. We'll talk about the value of that a little bit more, but the advanced is a living will. The living will goes together with the durable power of attorney. So the advance directive is basically you citing on a document what your end of life atmosphere might be. You want artificial hydration, nutrition. So this isn't necessarily an emergency situation we're talking about. This is just a steady decline kind of care, treatment and things you want. Typically people will say care last want to be made comfortable. Really useful for this if you're in a terminal condition. I know with my mom, the last couple of months she was non-responsive. She had her eyes open. Sometimes she would sleep. but she wasn't responding anymore. So we had hospice care to make sure any pain that developed, they were managing that. But even so, like at the last week of her life, based upon the estimate the hospice provider gave us, said, the nursing home where she's staying, they're under orders to give her artificial hydration and nutrition. We as hospice providers are saying this isn't going to make any difference. It's not keeping her alive. It's just trying to push something into, like blowing up a balloon, things happening. So that was very useful for us as a family because we had already had that information in the living will, but some family members weren't certain whether that was a good thing or bad thing. But the hospice nurse said, no, that's the right thing to do because the body is shutting down. It's not going to take nutrition or hydration. Sure enough, within a week, my mom had passed comfortably. So, and the power forms are basically you assigning decision-making power to someone you trust for your financial decision and your healthcare decision-making. Living will kind of gives the script to the durable power of attorney for your medical decision making. You can get those forms at Washington Law Help. You can actually print out living will and power of attorney forms that are legal here in the state of Washington. They typically do need a notary stamp on them. We always recommend, since you also should have your last will and testament set up, do some long-term care planning with an elder law attorney. Have somebody that's knowledgeable about care situations, facility care, hospice care, who knows how these documents are handled, how they can be implemented. Sometimes, my experience, we actually had a document that the elder law attorney set up for us where the properties were held in a living trust for my parents and the bank accounts and things. That made it very easy to manage things for myself as the trustee. Even so, there's a lot of second guessing and double checking that goes on with financial institutions, escrow companies. They don't quite know how a lot of this works themselves. So that's why having that elder law attorney available who's done those documents can intervene if necessary and say, those documents are legal in the state of Washington for the business that Matt Santelli is trying to conduct on the behalf of his parents.
Every Saturday, it's the post is like a guy,
Rajiv Nagayas. Yeah.
What do you think about his post? Because he's coming to Seattle this weekend.
So he does a lot of public seminars and presentations about elder law planning. I was actually on his show years ago, just answering some questions about Medicaid planning. We always recommend that you look at a whole list of elder law attorneys. We give you a list, and that way you can kind of get an idea. They do visit their websites and things, check out their Google reviews, do all that stuff. But he is one that's been around a long time and does elder law work for long-term care.
Yeah.
He's done a lot of public service like that, where he does promote decision-making there. I can't endorse or say somebody's good or bad, but we do have a longer list than just him that you could look at and do some research on.
Zach, can you talk a little bit about the power of attorney? The financial, I actually my dad was with us for the weekend and I just reviewed his most recent document that aren't finalized yet. And it's a durable power of attorney, but unfortunately it does have that incapacity clause in it. And another thing that was very odd on it, I'm curious if you know anything about this, it advanced his power of attorney, but then as secondary, if I was unwilling or unable to, to step into that role, it listed a corporate fiduciary, and I've never seen that. And of course, I pushed back and told us, we've got lots of family members that are more than willing and capable of stepping into that secondary role. No reason to have a corporate fiduciary.
Exactly.
To talk about that, I'm also trying to get him to have the lawyer change it to be effective immediately, so that if he's had for something, he's able to communicate, just not able to go to the bank himself, I can still act on his behalf without him being declared incompetent or incapable by a doctor. Can you?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, great point. So typically, on the power of attorney form, whether it's financial or medical, it's typically assign one person to be that decision maker with a secondary person. Sometimes you can assign like two people to be the decision maker for you. We generally don't recommend that. We really need to have one person. That's the one you're most confident in, and then having a second. So you could get an actual paid person. That's probably what this corporate fiduciary is. to be that decision maker for you. We've had people with significant estates who have no family members, where an actual guardianship service sometimes acts in that role. That's really, again, like you said, for people that really have no one around them to serve in that second capacity. So yeah, I would encourage you to think having a second family member listed there. Because we when I was power of attorney, I traveled to visit my son in Switzerland. So my brother was listed as the second for my parents because I was going to be out of the country at the time. So I'm not available, so he would act as the second. The incapacity clause, we write that here. We really encourage folks to have those power of attorney forms to be immediately, to avoid the effective at incapacity clauses if possible. Now, again, I'm not an attorney. I'll just talk from my own family member's perspective. An incapacity clause on the document basically says that some professional medical person, a doctor typically, has to render a decision saying you're no longer capable of being the decision maker. Prior to that point, the form is not active. It says it becomes active when the doctor certifies you are no longer capable. In my experience, doctors do not want to do that because they're going to say they don't know you well enough. They don't involved in a legal squabble among family members because family members object sometimes, or the person will object. And so, this is where these discussions early, like you, are important because strokes happen, cancer happens, injury falls happen, traumatic brain injuries happen. Let me give you an example with my uncle. We had it written out already that said it was effective immediately because he was going in for knee surgery. So we put it all together, and my uncle trusted me. I was his godson. So we got all the forms together. We went in, had the knee surgery. She had been putting off for years, actually. So the whole story is kind of ironic. So knee surgery successful. I take him home. Doctor calls. You need to return him to the hospital immediately. I was like, why? What's going on? Every evidence of lab result is telling us he has blood cancer, leukemia. And he was a lifelong smoker, so it didn't surprise me. So boom, barely got him home, took him back. Immediately, he was in renal failure. Immediately, they had to put him unconscious for a week, all kinds of protective treatments and fluids and blood transfusion. So what we thought was be like a day's worth of power of attorney suddenly became months and months where I was the decision maker. We didn't anticipate that. Now, no doctor was going to sign that form and say, well, even though he's unconscious, he's incapacitated. They didn't know him. They just knew they had to treat him. They didn't know my uncle. So in my experience, again, you might hear other things from other people. In my experience, it has to be effective immediately. And then everybody agrees. It goes into the file cabinet. Everybody knows where it is. If we need it, we'll take it out and use it. If the state file cabinet, that's my perspective on it. Because things do happen to all of us immediately, and we don't have a way to predict them happening. It also really avoids the whole issue of will the doctor agree? Will they not agree? Most likely they're not going to agree. And so it's just better to start partnering as a team among your family members to start the decision-making process long before it has to happen. And then everybody's happy. You don't have to worry until something bad happens. Then the form's already complete. Absolutely. Absolutely. This is the other thing we tell people. Everybody has to know these forms are being created. You can put a decision maker name on that form like you can put an executive. They need to know about it. Now, again, I'm not an attorney, but I've heard attorneys say, no, don't. I don't know what perspective they're coming from. I can only speak of my own family. I knew where the power of attorney forms were. I knew where my uncle's will was. We had the trust document already in place for my parents years before they needed it. Do any good if the person handling that document doesn't know where it is, let alone doesn't know they're named on the document. You got to have that information out and available to everybody, because we have clients that call children who say, mom had a stroke, she's unconscious, the power of attorney form, too late, can't do it. Or dad died, we know we have a will, we know where it is, we can't help you unless you recorded it at the county, which you can do. Most people don't. Absolutely. If you want, yeah, You can record it because then it's publicly, you can access it at any time and it's a certified copy. So there's a lot of strategies here that an elder law attorney would talk with you about. There's a misconception on the part of a lot of people that think these documents are somehow supervised and enforceable by some government entity. They're not. These are private agreements between you and your family members. Because we do get people call and will say, where the will is, my dad died, my brother claims he's the executor, show me the will, I don't trust him. I'm like, you're gonna have to sue him, you're gonna have to take legal action. We're not gonna jump in and solve disputes. So avoid the disputes by everyone knowing who's assigned where the documents are, and do it early. Okay, that's really good.
Do the family members at some time together read the will?
That's what we did in our own family situation when we had trust. We had 4 of us siblings, and everybody was getting an equal share. And then I was listed the lead trustee. If I died, then my brother would have. Yeah. So yeah, we did everything kind of ahead of time, so there was no question later. Well, who told dad to do that, or dad I wanted, and stuff like that. So there's advice you can go even further than that. You know, some say that in the trust booklet there were several pages where we could have identified personal belongings too, like the living room couch goes to Nick, the winemaking supplies goes to Matt. You can get to that level of detail. We were in a situations where, you know, my sister, who was involved with a lot of the care, we just said, if you want to have a garage sale with the belongings, go ahead, do it. It gets a little, my parents didn't have anything of value like antiques. They had some jewelry, but if you've got like a classic car collection, yeah, that needs to be listed in there. If it's just been driving around forever, you know, someone's going to get it. You can certainly give it to somebody, but you want to make it detailed enough that it's a useful document. And yes, everybody should know about what's on there. Part of the estate should know what's on there.
We had a situation this weekend again because the family was together. We brought in a company to our entire house and said, we'd like to help you sell it.
Okay.
Sell the stuff.
Yeah.
And this value, that runs up. Then went through all this stuff. And when they all sat down, he says, it's too small a project for a company our size to handle.
Yeah, because they're going to get a piece of the action when they sell. Yeah.
So we had to abandon that idea. So we're going to try another way of doing that.
Yeah, and that's not uncommon. My parents would have been in the same situation. There would never have been enough items of value to have an estate sale run by an estate company. We just did some garage sales. We donated a lot of stuff. And sometimes stuff you think's valuable is not. My uncle had stuff segregated with dollar amounts on them, like jewelry and stuff. I took him to the jeweler that I trusted, and they said, no, these isn't even real jewelry. It's this costume jewelry. And then he had a gold chain that he hadn't identified at all. I took it to one of these gold, silver and gold coin places around town. That turned out to be worth like $2,000. It was just sitting on top of his cabinet at home. So sometimes, yeah, it helps to have some professional view of what's the value, because that helps on the decision making too, you know. Okay. You're doing a great, sounds like. You really are. Fantastic. And this is again, like Jen and I were talking about, preparing quickly. Things can change rapidly. A stroke, a fall, some significant injury can really change your ability to function physically and mentally. These things have to be done ahead of those things that might happen. Having some sort of an emergency reaction plan in place is really important. Understand you might have some family members that don't want to have a discussion about your long-term care planning. They don't want to think about you as declining in any way or losing capacity. I would discuss with them fully, and then if they're able to, you know, mentally be engaged in the planning, then you could keep them apprised of the planning rather than to pull them something they're not capable of. Yeah.
Stepson and the daughter.
Yeah.
And me.
Yeah.
So it's
absolutely. Yeah. For us, we all sat in on the planning. You know, the implementation of some of the plans was a little challenging at times. Some people felt very overwhelmed emotionally. Others were kind of convinced that my parents weren't as sick as they truly. So, you know, having those discussions ahead of time again is very useful. Sometimes there'll be friends involved that are in denial, so they want you to kind of keep doing the things you've been doing when you're trying to go a different direction. Sometimes they'll often try to set plans in your family to try to keep you happy because you've been their lifelong friend. Again, this is where you, as the person planning, have to think about who's looking out for safety. The longer you can look out for health and safety and have trusted individuals doing that, the longer you'll be able to stay healthy, safe, and stable at home. That's the goal. So that's what we're always talking about. Planning is really the key. And adult children who are in these roles really have to learn to be assertive and forceful, really willing to spoil relationships that aren't working. The decision maker must be prepared to have those aging parents and their allies become angry with you, stay confident, and stay the course. So this is really an adult child kind of paragraph, really reminding folks that if you're doing the job right, someone might be unhappy with what, but you're going to have that confidence of moving forward. Plus,
Is that when we made the decision, then let's take a look there and see if that's gonna work for everybody.
excellent.
Keep the ruffled feathers down.
Yeah, excellent. So yeah, it sounds like you guys really had an excellent plan. That's everything we're talking about. Yeah. And that assertiveness and forcefulness comes up too in medical decisions. It comes up in financial decisions. I know at times really had to push the doctor to kind of change some we're doing. Things like the urinary tract infections my mom would have. She would wet herself. She didn't like us touching her, so sometimes she would be wet for a day or two in some cases. So she would develop these urinary tract infections, and we knew it based upon the change in her demeanor. She would talk about, I feel burning, I feel locked. She would get scared of the delusions she was having. So I really had to really work the doctor into saying, you know, I don't want to keep bringing her in to give a urine sample. It's this giant battle. You know, can we come up with another way for you to prescribe these antibiotics? Because we know what's happening. And it took a while, but he did come around to the idea of saying, okay, give us the symptom profile. If you report it out to us, you know, we'll go ahead and do that. So we were able to get the antibiotics just prescribed without her giving the urine sample. So, but it took a lot of work on my part to kind of bring that up and bring that up and bring it up again. The same way when my dad had a stroke, you know, we had to get doctor's orders for certain treatments and things. And so I became the communicator with the doctor. So you got to have someone that's really willing to mix it up sometimes with those doctor's offices to have the person closest to you in the family might not be the best person for that. It might be someone in the family that's really tough and is always willing to piss people off to get the job done. That might be the person for your healthcare decision making, because sometimes you do have to be very assertive to get things done. So, okay, so you're in that thinking of how do I pay for some sort of professional care that I might need in the home or in a care facility? What are the options? Medicare, most of us will have 65, pays for short-term home health care, rehabilitation, also pays for short-term stays in skilled nursing facilities. So you broke your hip, you go to the emergency room, they send you home and say, okay, come to surgery at the hospital next week, whatever the situation is. You go in, you have your surgery, meet with the doctor, says surgery went fine. We're going to keep you here a few nights, make sure you're stable. You're going to go to the care facility, skilled nursing for rehabilitation, physical therapy. You go there, first 20 days are paid. So your hospitalization is going to be paid by Medicare, less the deductible. Stay in the skilled nursing facility will be paid for the first 20 days. In most cases, if you have an Advantage plan, they might do that a little bit differently. But basically, once you get past 20 days, you're going to incur a daily copay of anywhere from $180 to $200 a day. So most skilled nursing facilities will rehabilitate you for 20 days. Then they're going to tell you you need to go home. You can go home, get some home health care. You can still do physical therapy in the home, occupational therapy, speech therapy, whatever you might need. Or you might go to a physical therapy rehabilitation center near your home. In all these cases, this is short-term recovery and rehabilitation from an injury or illness. If you had a massive stroke while you were in the hospital and they sent you to the care facility, they're not going to pay for you to stay in a care facility because you're post-stroke. If you're not capable of handling yourself any longer, can't The choice would be staying there private pay to like an adult family home that can provide care private pay. You might qualify for Medicaid, but the Medicaid rules are very strict on income and assets, especially for single people. We can help you with all that if you call us at our numbers on the final picture, but just want to make sure people are aware that there's no Medicare alternative to pay for long-term care. There isn't one there. So people pay for it. Some people have long-term care insurance that might pay $100 a day for your care, something like that. Might have a veterans benefit, Medicaid again. We have in-home care programs. These are the acronyms: COPES, PSOA. We have programs that can pay for care coming into your home if you qualify on income and assets. Plus, we have our family caregiver support program, still very limited, 24 hours a month of relief care coming into the home for someone that's in the home living with you and caring for you. That one is just based on income. There's no resource. People can have income as high as, I think, $4,200 a month and qualify at zero cost. This is there.
We talked about that because that's my daughter's number 11.
Yeah.
So that is two things right off the bat. It keeps her having to pay rent on a place to rent.
Yep.
That's for free. The other thing is, I got someone to talk to.
Absolutely. Yeah.
She's got someone to cook for.
Yeah.
And she's close to her. She can work from home.
Beautiful.
She's in the medical business.
Wonderful.
So she can take care of me also to a degree.
Yeah. Excellent. No, that's great. We have a lot of families in those situations. We have close to 200 families on this family caregiver support program. Some it's husbands and wives. Sometimes it's an adult child living with a parent. And so it just gives us an opportunity to provide that caregiver with some relief time during the week so they can take care of their own appointments and just give them that mental health break when they need it. Private pay, we talked about 35 an hour. So we should update that. It's probably closer to $40 an hour to have somebody come in from an agency. Long-term care insurance, I've never been able to qualify for it. I was diagnosed with high blood pressure, high cholesterol. My wife's a type 1 diabetic since she was 12 years old, so we would never have qualified. Some people have those policies. The premiums have gone up over the years. The benefits have gone down. So people have them, though. Hang on to them if you got them and you can afford them, because they're like gold. They're difficult to get anymore. Final page of the presentation has information on asset and income limits for the Medicaid program. And then remember, if you're planning for yourself, these are you agree to. They're voluntary. So you're agreeing to the care you need as long as you're capable of doing so. This is why it gets difficult again. When my mom had her appendectomy, needed some physical therapy, she was agreeable to it because she didn't have dementia yet. Same with my dad. He took a fall. He did some recovery. In her dementia year, that last year of her life, we tried to put professional caregivers in the home. She hated it. She told him to leave. She cussed him out. We were able to finally manage a couple nights a week with a caregiver. She turned out just to spend the night there for safety. And then we covered the family members, but it's all voluntary. So we can't impose care on somebody who does not want it. And that's true for any kind of a care situation, whether it's in the home or going to a care facility. And so early on, I was thinking, before my mom had 4 falls in the last year of her life, the last one, concussion, knocked her out, never was well enough to return home. I acted sooner, but it would have been big. The time she had that last fall, hit her head, there was no longer to be had because she really wasn't very responsive anymore. So you could say I acted too late, earlier. So I'm still 93. So you have to call it good enough at some point, right? You can always second guess yourself otherwise. So this is what happened. You may fail, end up having to wait for a major medical emergency to execute your action plan, but having a plan in place is the key. You got to think about what happens on falls. We had already planned, had the money set aside. If she fell, we anticipated she would go into care, never leave. That's certainly what happened. She hospital for a few, care facility tried to rehabilitate her to the extent they could. 21st day, they said she's as good as she's going to get. She's not well enough to go home. Paid privately at the care facility after that for 3 more months until she died. I think it was $11,000 a month for a private room that she had, something like that. So that was years ago.
came up was, he get into my house. That we always lock everything up.
Yep.
So you gotta have someone that knows where the keys are. So one of the things I've done is gone to the neighbors.
Okay.
That's the start. I don't know what to do beyond.
There's also some locking
Yeah.
residential lock boxes that you can get. There are some made by a corporation called Knox. They tend to be a little bit expensive, but firefighters have Knox keys on all of our engines and our medic units. So you could put your phone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we would be able to access that Knox system if you needed emergency care. But then there's also, I've got a really good article I could share with you that was done in Wirecutter. And rates much less expensive private home locking systems. So I'd be happy to make you a copy of that article.
So I used to go to my own fire department, which is only 2 blocks away or so, and have a little talk to them.
You could do that.
And see if they want to come up with a solution. The people I've met there before are very, very helpful.
Yeah, they'll probably recommend the same things. Knox
That's
is
what I'm getting
nationwide
at.
organization. And we have, like most fire departments, Knox keys where we access businesses. If a business has an alarm,
Yeah.
they've got an alarm panel that has a Knox key in it. And we can just go access it with our key. So they do make residential systems, but I'll make you a copy of that article I was telling you about.
That's great. Glad to hear that. I know I had a client in Graham with multiple sclerosis years ago, and he lived in a mobile home, and he was constantly falling, probably 7 or 8 times a month. He was falling, typically getting off the toilet, he'd fall. And so, yeah, they installed almost like one you'd see it, just for sale. It had like a code and the key comes out. So they were willing to kind of use that instead of trying to, muscle the door open, whatever they had to do. So yeah, helps a lot. So facility levels of care, again, these low numbers in Pierce County, assisted livings, probably 6,000 a month. Assisted livings are folks who need a little bit of help, maybe some prompting to shower and things like that, medication reminders. If you need a lot of care, you typically jump to adult family home, and then skip nursing facilities beyond that. So my mother-in-law was total care at the end of her life. She needed to be lifted up out of bed into a chair. They had a Hoyer lift where they would put her in to shower her safely. She was non-responsive. My mom was non-responsive the last few months in her life. We kept her at the care facility because it was convenient. My mother, I was at that adult for close to 2 years, total care situation. A reminder on Medicare, again, doesn't pay for anything other than short. Block Cares program that I talked about, that one's only going to be for active workers going forward who retire or get injured or are ill. They can tap that money. Whether the program survives or not after the fall, we'll see. Again, and very important though, number 13, physician orders. You got to have that close relationship with the physician because you're going to need to go into a care facilities and medications and things like that. Typically, you'll need a care assessment for an adult family home. You can call so we can set that up for you. Typically, assisted living, skilled nursing, their nursing teams do the assessments for admissions on those folks. So that doctor relationship is really important because folks, especially living alone, especially the men, they gave up on seeing doctors and they don't have anyone to write orders to them. And it's really a big deal because finding doctors in today's medical world is really difficult, especially an older adult with a complex medical profile, really difficult. So hang on to those doctors. And I know it's frustrating. They don't see you live like they used to, but hang on to your doctors. Very important.
My annual, did checkup and so forth.
Yeah.
And every time I'm there, he says, "Oh look, and she says your skin is nice and tight and blah blah."
Yeah.
He says, "And you're 93 and a whole bunch of other things." And then finally he says, "I'm just trying to keep going."
Very good. Very good. Yeah, that's great.
He's scary.
Yeah, he's doing a good job. 93. In terms of secure facilities, assisted living, memory care are only the secure facilities that are available in Pierce County in terms of they're a locked unit. People can't free to come and go. Skilled nursing, adult family homes, typically they have door alarms, but people do leave those facilities against medical advice in some situations. We do have secure memory care. My in-laws were in secure memory care as husband and wife for close to a year and a half, I think it was. And my wife was managing their care as full power of attorney. So we don't really have an equivalent older adults like children have with child protective services. You might have heard of adult services. We can have them investigate vulnerable adults, especially those that live alone or really declining. Their home's a mess. They're not taking care of their hygiene. They might have a neighbor or some so-called friend financially exploiting them. We can make the referral, but having action happen from those referrals is very limited. They have an option to file a guardianship over a person, but it's a long process. They're really not in the business of doing those routinely. So this is why the planning's so important. Again, when I talked about there's no government entity that's going to enforce your power of attorney forms or make sure your will is done correctly in the same manner. There's nobody that's really going to be looking out your care in terms of who's managing that for you and planning it for you. We can do a plan with you, but again, the county officers like myself, we can't be decision makers on those documents. Neither can anyone in Jen's office do that here, Pierce Fire and Rescue. Those are the people around you that you trust. You got to figure out who have those roles when you're no longer able to make the decision. Family members can file guardianships. We've had family members do that. They go through a court, get that established. It's an adversarial process. So this is, again, someone in your family member serving you with paper saying you're not capable of making your own decisions anymore. You have the ability to respond. It usually gets very messy, a lot of anger. Again, hope you can avoid that. Early planning for is the key. Trust and rapport, having family united on a plan, staying flexible for sudden changes. Those are all the things that go into it. Having those conversations, having them early and often so everybody's aware of any changes that might happen. Okay, so we talked about home accessibility and safety. These are just some suggestions that I went through with my parents, but if you go to the Alzheimer's store, they got all kinds of cool stuff for adaptive things at your home, especially for someone who might have some memory loss. Timers you can put on the stove, so the stove automatically shuts off. They have restrictors on faucets, so that someone has to be actively at the faucet for the water to flow, so people don't flood out. My mom flooded out the bathroom. She almost burned down the kitchen, leaving a pot on the stove. A lot of safety things. What I did at the beginning, checking all heating and cooling systems. We swapped out the oil furnace for a gas furnace, put in the grab bars, the ramps. We got them an adjustable bed, put door alarms on. We ended up locking the passageway to the basement. There was no reason they needed to go in the basement, so we put a lock on that door. Thought we had removed all the car keys from the home. We were wrong about that because my dad was putting my mom in his little truck and she was driving around Fircrest unbeknownst to us until police officer pulled her over. So had to go back and find the keys again. Shower chairs, bath benches, shower heads, toilet risers, shoe horns. I mean, there's an amazing array of things you can get when you're losing your ability to easily get dressed in the morning or shower. A lot of really great things we can come up with, do that a lot easier. Safe medication containers, walkers, wheelchairs. We always recommend you think about loose carpets, throw rugs. You want to think anything that might put you at risk of falling. And then we got utensils for my dad because he had like a Parkinson's tremor, so he could eat better. These are very heavy spoons and forks that keep that tremor from interfering with eating. You could have guards around the plate, which we got so he could push the food. That's the little guard attached to the plate to eat better. All kinds of cool stuff. Personal emergency fall detection systems, safe return bracelets. We got one of those for my mom in case she wandered. It has a toll-free number on there that if a person, they can call and then it alerts family members. So you don't want to have something with someone with dementia that has their name, address, and phone number on that. You don't want that. Some predator might find them and take them home. You want something that's from a monitored program where it'll just have a toll-free number on there. Anyone that finds them calls, and that call alerts family members where they are.
And I look at the thing and I said, what is it about this shoe that could be dangerous in here? What is the danger of shoehorn?
Well, typically we've had people that have, when they were trying to use a short shoehorn, they would fall. Yeah, and that's what typically happens. So I got one for my dad that was like 3 feet long, so he could easily stand up, slip it in there, and put his shoe on. my neighbor actually, she was on her bed trying to tie her shoes, fell, broke her neck. So something as simple as that, so they do have these easily adaptable shoes as you get older that are just, they have a flexible back heel. So you can, they advertise them on TV. So you can just step into the shoe very easily. Velcro is another thing that's good for that. Because getting the shoes on my mom and dad both was just, such an ordeal. No. So if you have someone around you, like your daughter's going to be moving in, certain things, fundamentals of caregiving classes, first aid. If she's ever having to lift you, have those back and leg and arm support belts that they can wear. If she needs a break, think about some relaxation techniques. All the documents we talked about, have them in place and known where they are. Burial cremation plans, that's another thing we didn't talk about, but you can set up your burial plan, whether you're going to do a cremation, you can prepay for that, and it's all done at the funeral home. You keep a copy. That's part of the long-term care planning.
Sure. Is that a good idea?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a similar thing. They're all kind of like insurance plans, but they cover the cost, for the basic funeral. And then other health and safety tips for caregivers, like we talked about, stress reduction techniques, healthcare needs, proper rest and nutrition, staying active, exercising, movement, getting out, getting a break from caregiving. I know for me, it was very stressful, probably the most stressful thing I've ever done outside of work. My wife went through her parents. I did it with my uncle. And especially when you layer on a dementia kind of situation, it becomes very stressful because you're always worried about some disaster happening. And the whole house could have easily burned down with the way the condition of the kitchen that day. And again, this was something I had gone through and up a lot of things. It didn't update the home safety alarm they had. I thought it was a monitored smoke alarm system. It was not. So the alarms were going off but it didn't notify the fire department, which is literally down the hill, block from my parents. So yeah, subsequent to that, I updated everything so their fire safety, all that, and the caregiver support too.
Did you update them? What did you do?
So they had a home security. So it had like entryway alarms, like if someone tried to open the door, break into the door, a burglar alarm. I thought it also had monitored smoke and fire detection system because they had smoke alarms all through the house. And I wasn't there when when the fire happened in the kitchen, the smoke alarm in the hallway went off, and that alerted my dad, but it didn't notify the fire department. So you want to make sure you have one that's notifying the necessary services to respond, because they really should have responded, because it was a bad fire. Dad put it out with a garden hose. He ran in from the outside into that kitchen. The kitchen was saturated. And so, yeah, it was very dangerous. So make sure you have something that monitored for smoke. You probably got the stations get those calls a lot, I'm assuming, right? Yeah. Yeah. So, and
They were for a while.
I mean, we have smoke alarms that we'll install in people's homes,
That's what I mean.
but that's different than what now.
having it monitored. Yeah.
Monitors. Like there's not a third party like ADT, for example,
Yeah.
that's monitoring that.
It's the alert.
It's amazing how close sometimes you come to just after a talk in my back patio area, and I heard this alarm system going off. And I said, where the heck is it coming from? So I said, something that's coming from over here. So I walked down the driveway, and I found my next door neighbor. And I ran over there, and what had happened, she had boiled some eggs. And then she fell in the street. Colors and shit was on. She had passed out. So, geez, I shut everything off and opened the door to the fire department, the police, and the whole bird. I got to thinking, would have happened had I not been there at that moment.
Yeah, this is the issue. Yeah, because and even this morning, to give you an example, I was trying to let my wife sleep, so I was getting ready. I always put the coffee, the hot water kettle on for her, so when she does get up, it's because she's tired. So I put I put the hot water kettle on the stove, put the gas, and the flame comes up. I'm like, great. I got busy doing other stuff, but I was like, oh, I got a shower now. I'm in the shower and I kettle going off, whistling. I'm like, oh, heard my wife get up. I felt terrible, but again, that's just, yeah, you forget about stuff like that, and it can lead to some situation. So having that monitored system is really useful in those situations, especially for older adults living alone. They get forgetful.
It not only keep falling asleep, but now she's unconscious from breathing the smoke.
Oh, yeah, that's terrible. Yeah,
Eyeball.
yeah,
Smoke from
Yeah.
the egg.
yeah,
Not as awful.
Terrible.
Yeah.
smell.
yeah.
Mm.
Wow. So she's survived through that though. Oh.
Have people do something like that?
Wow.
She could have died.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I wish I had taken a photo of the damage in my mom's kitchen that day because it was terrible. I mean, pretty much it had the overhanging light and fan above the stove that completely melted from the heat. It had actually the heat was so much that it actually burned through the wood cabinet above that and scorched the whole ceiling. I mean, we had to pull the cap off, had to pull the stove out. We had to have an abatement company come in and get rid. It was just terrible. The whole house could have burned down easily. Okay, so last page, here are some of the resources we talked about. That's my office, the first one there, the Pierce County Aging Disability Resource Center. That's our phone number, contact information. Didn't talk a lot about care facility, but if you're looking at possibilities for care facility living, assisted living, adult family home, skilled nursing, we have an ombudsman in the county. Each county has one. It's a team of folks, county employees leading a team of volunteers where they go out and do problem solving. They do quality assurance inspections, file reports for care facilities in Pierce County. So if you call us and you said, I've got things figured out, I'm going to choose between, care facility A, B, and C, we could give you the most recent report on the quality of that facility. Caregiver conference this Friday. Flyers are back there. You can get signed up online or call. Unfortunately, the lunch choices that expired last weekend because we had to order the lunches. But we'll have some breakfast food there and stuff like that. Or you can just leave at lunchtime if you don't want to stick around for the afternoon session. But encourage you guys to come out for that. We're gonna have a lot of great speakers, some great presentations. I'll have a table there if you come say hi. Caregiver support groups, I have some information there. There's other information at those locations. We talked about the Alzheimer's store. We talked about the CARES program. That's this flyer for caregiver coaching. And then I also put a brochure back there for the donor closet. This is a company in Pierce County. It's a nonprofit in Tacoma where they have a lot of secondhand medical equipment that they take in, they sanitize, they repair. So if you need a cheap walker or wheelchair or something like that, you can call them and get it from them. It's a pretty good deal. And then these are the standards for the different in-home care programs I discussed on income, assets. They're more generous than they used to be, still very restrictive for a lot of our population in terms of income, especially the assets on some of the programs. The family caregiver program does have an income standard, but no asset limit at all. So that's the presentation. I hope you guys gained something from it. I appreciate the comments and questions along the way. I've got extra handouts there, lots of stuff on the table. So take it all, take it for yourself, a friend, family member, share it widely. And we'd love to have you be back in June on the 16th or July on the 16th, where we're talking about the deeper dive into the legal documents, right? That's the next one up, right? Keep it legal. I think it, yeah. We should. I've got the existing one there. Or I thought I did. Yeah, I should be doing something soon. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I thought I had the existing one.
But you're welcome to share the link to register and they can zoom in. Okay. Yeah, we don't necessarily know how many people are gonna come in person, and so we try and reserve people within our fire district, so. Okay.
And then we'll be continuing through November. We'll do August, September, October, and November. So yeah. And,
I know, we'll have to try and figure out how to get more people here, because it's such incredibly valuable information.
yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. So yeah, encourage people to visit these Pierce Fire and Rescue homepage. It's they're under classes and events, I think, or events and classes. So yeah, that's the, yeah.